I came to the mountains as a tourist, but also as someone running from noise, from people, from the constant feeling that life was always pushing forward without asking if I was ready. The guidebook promised marked trails, safe routes, breathtaking views. It did not mention how quickly confidence can turn into fear. The first hours were perfect. Thin sunlight filtered through pine branches, the air sharp and clean, every breath feeling earned. I followed the trail without thinking, stopping only to take photos, to sit on a rock and listen to the wind moving across the slopes like a living thing. Somewhere along the way, I decided to take a shortcut. Just a small deviation, I told myself. Just a better view. That decision cost me everything. The trail thinned, then vanished entirely beneath fresh snow. Clouds rolled in without warning, swallowing the peaks above me. The temperature dropped fast, far faster than my body could adapt. I checked my phone. No signal. The map app spun uselessly, unable to decide where I was. When I turned around, nothing looked familiar. Trees stood identical in every direction, silent witnesses to my mistake. Panic crept in slowly, like cold water rising around my chest. I forced myself to keep moving, choosing what I thought was downhill. My foot slipped on hidden ice, and the ground disappeared beneath me. Pain exploded through my leg as I fell, rolling hard until my body slammed against stone. I screamed. The sound felt weak, stolen by the wind. My leg wouldn't move. Snow soaked through my clothes, stealing heat with cruel efficiency. I tried to stand and failed, tried again, failed again. Each attempt left me weaker, more aware of how fragile I really was. Night approached without mercy. The mountains darkened, shapes turning into shadows, shadows into threats. I huddled against a rock, arms wrapped around myself, teeth chattering uncontrollably. Thoughts blurred. Time stretched. I knew the signs. Hypothermia. Sleep would come next, and after that, nothing. That was when the silence broke. A deep crunch echoed through the snow. Then another, slow, heavy, deliberate. At first I thought it was my mind finally giving up, but the sound grew closer, and something massive moved between the trees. I lifted my head, heart hammering, and saw a shape that should not exist stepping calmly out of the storm. And in that moment, I understood. I was not going to die alone. The shape moved closer without haste, as if the storm itself made room for it. Snow slid from its shoulders in heavy clumps. It stood taller than any man I had ever seen, broad and impossibly solid, yet its steps left no panic in the air, only intention. I tried to scream, but my throat produced nothing more than a dry gasp. My mind searched desperately for explanations. A bear, a trick of the light, a hallucination brought on by cold and fear. But bears do not walk upright with balance like that. Hallucinations do not leave footprints so deep, they crack the frozen crust of the snow. It stopped a few steps away from me. Up close, the creature was terrifying and strangely calm at the same time. Thick fur covered its body, matted with ice and pine needles. Its face was neither human nor animal, but balanced somewhere between. Strong jaw, deep-set eyes, a wide nose flaring as it breathed. Those eyes focused on me with something that looked dangerously close to understanding. I raised one shaking hand, not to defend myself, but in surrender. My body had no strength left for fear anyway. If this was how I was going to die, at least I would see it clearly. The creature lowered itself to one knee. It leaned closer, sniffing the air around me, then let out a low sound, not a growl, not a roar, but something almost thoughtful. Its gaze dropped to my leg, twisted and useless in the snow. I followed its eyes and felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. "No, please," I whispered. not knowing what I was asking for. The creature reached out. Its hand was enormous, covered in coarse fur, fingers thick and powerful. I flinched as it touched my shoulder, but the grip was gentle, careful, as if it understood how fragile I was. With surprising ease, it lifted me from the ground, cradling my body against its chest. Warmth surrounded me instantly. I remember fragments after that. The rhythmic movement as it walked, the sound of wind muffled by fur, snow brushing my face, then disappearing as something shielded me. Once, I opened my eyes and saw stars above the trees, bright and sharp, before darkness claimed me again. When I woke, firelight danced across stone walls. I lay on a bed of dry leaves and fur inside a cave, my leg wrapped tightly with strips of fabric torn from my own clothes. A small fire crackled nearby, its heat pressing life back into my frozen limbs. My backpack lay open beside me, carefully arranged, nothing taken. Across the fire, the creature sat silently, watching. I should have been screaming. Instead, the only thought in my mind was simple and terrifying in its clarity. Whatever this thing was, it had chosen to save me. I don't know how many hours passed before I truly woke. Time inside the cave felt different, stretched thin and folded over itself. The fire had burned down to glowing embers, and the air smelled of smoke, pine resin, and damp stone. For a long moment, I lay still, afraid that any sudden movement would remind the creature that I was there. Pain pulsed through my leg, dull but persistent. When I shifted slightly, I felt the rough bindings holding it straight. Whoever, or whatever, had done this knew what they were doing. The creature noticed my movement immediately. It rose from its place by the cave wall, its height forcing me to tilt my head back to meet its gaze. In the flickering light, I could see details I had missed before. Old scars crossing its arms, patches of fur lighter with age, eyes that reflected fire like polished stone. It made a low sound again, softer this time, and pushed a small container toward me. Water. I drank greedily, spilling half of it down my chin, not caring. The warmth spread slowly through my chest, and with it came a strange sense of shame. I was helpless, dependent, alive only because something I had been taught was a myth decided my life was worth saving. The days that followed settled into a fragile routine. The creature left the cave and always returned, bringing food, roots, berries, strips of cooked meat. It fed the fire, adjusted my splint, and watched me with constant, quiet attention. It never touched me unnecessarily, never showed aggression. Its movements were careful, measured, as if it understood restraint better than most humans I knew. I tried to speak to it. At first out of fear, later out of need. I told it my name. I told it I was sorry. I thanked it until the words felt thin and useless. It listened without reacting, head slightly tilted, as though filing away sounds rather than meanings. On the fourth day, something changed. I heard voices. At first I thought I was imagining them like before, but these voices were sharp, human, carried by the wind. Shouts echoed through the valley below the cave, followed by the distant thump of machinery. My heart leapt with relief, and then sank with dread. The creature froze. Its body went tense, every muscle drawn tight. It moved to the cave entrance and peered out, eyes narrowing. When the sound of a helicopter cut through the air, loud and mechanical, it recoiled as if struck. Fear filled its face, not fear for itself alone, but for what my rescue would bring. It turned back to me, pointing toward the cave wall, then toward the valley. Go, down, leave. The message was clear. In that moment, understanding hit me harder than the fall ever had. I was not the only one in danger anymore. The helicopter grew louder, its sound tearing through the mountain air like a wound that refused to close. Snow lifted from the trees in violent spirals, and shadows raced across the cave walls. I saw the creature hesitate for the first time since we met. Not from confusion. This was fear sharpened by experience. It helped me stand. My weight leaned heavily against its side as it guided me toward the cave entrance. Every movement was rushed now, no longer quiet and patient. Outside, the sky had cleared just enough for visibility. I could see figures far below, moving in bright jackets, pointing upward, searching, looking for me. The creature lowered me onto a flat rock near the edge of the trees. It crouched beside me and met my eyes, holding my gaze with a seriousness that made my chest tighten. One massive hand pressed briefly against my shoulder, not a goodbye, but a command, live. Then it stood. Against the white slope and dark trees, its form was unmistakable, towering, ancient, real. The wind shifted, and I heard shouting below, voices rising in alarm, disbelief, excitement. Someone had seen it. The helicopter swung closer. I tried to scream, tried to wave, tried to warn them. My mouth opened, but no sound came. I watched in horror as cameras turned, lenses focusing, people pointing. The creature took a step back, then another retreating toward the tree line. But it was too late. It had been seen. Moments later, hands grabbed me, voices flooded my ears, and my world dissolved into chaos. Oxygen mask, blankets, shouting questions, the roar of the helicopter as they lifted me away from the mountain. Through the open door, I searched the forest desperately. There was nothing. No movement. No massive shape. Only snow and trees swallowing a secret they had guarded for centuries. At the hospital they called me lucky. A miracle. A story worth telling. Reporters came. Doctors smiled. But behind the smiles were questions no one asked out loud. Men in plain clothes visited my room, their eyes too sharp, their curiosity too controlled. "What did you see up there?" one of them asked. I told them the truth without saying it. I said I was confused. I said I remembered very little. I blamed shock, pain, the cold. They didn't look convinced. That night, staring at the ceiling, I understood something that changed me forever. The mountain had saved me. Now it was my turn to return the favor. Recovery was measured in weeks, but guilt ignored timelines. My leg healed faster than my thoughts. Every night I dreamed of snow-filled silence and dark eyes reflecting firelight. The world I returned to felt thin, noisy, impatient. People moved quickly, spoke loudly, cared briefly. The mountains had ruined me for normal life. I watched the news carefully. No official statements, no confirmations, just rumors buried in comment sections, shaky footage dismissed as hoaxes, scientists arguing on television about shadows and scale. The interest was there, though. Subtle, persistent. I recognized it now, the kind that doesn't fade, the kind that hunts. When I could walk without crutches, I packed again. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't bring a camera. I brought supplies, maps marked only in my head, and a promise I wasn't sure I could keep. If they were searching for it, then I would search first, not to expose, but to warn. The mountains greeted me with indifference. I moved slower this time, listening more than walking, respecting slopes I would have ignored before. I left food where instinct told me to. I avoided open ridges and places where helicopters might see movement. Days passed with no sign, and doubt crept in, whispering that maybe I had imagined everything. On the 5th night, I found footprints. They were half buried, already softening at the edges, but unmistakable, too large, too deep. My heart raced as I followed them into denser forest, moving carefully, announcing myself with soft sounds rather than silence. I stopped before the clearing without knowing why. Something was there. I felt it before I saw it. The pressure in the air, the sense of being evaluated. Then it stepped into view, taller than I remembered, fur darker now without the snow. It watched me without fear, without warmth. Trust, once broken, does not return easily. I raised my hands again, just like the first time. I spoke its name, one I had invented, one it had never heard. I told it about the men, the machines, the questions. I told it I had come back because leaving had felt like betrayal. The creature listened. Then slowly, it turned and motioned for me to follow. This time, it wasn't rescuing me. It was testing me. Following the creature felt like stepping out of the human world entirely. It moved through the mountains along paths no map had ever recorded. Narrow ledges and hidden valleys shielded from the sky by stone and trees. I struggled to keep up, my leg aching with every step. But it never rushed me. It waited when I fell behind, watched when I rested. Over time I began to understand its signals. A raised hand meant stop. A short grunt meant danger. A long, low sound meant safety. Language formed not from words, but from shared intent. The searches intensified. Drones appeared first, buzzing insects cutting across the silence. Then came teams on foot, researchers, not rescuers, carrying equipment instead of compassion. I learned to mislead them. I left false tracks in soft snow, guided hikers toward distant valleys, reported fake sightings miles away. Lies came easier than I expected when the truth carried a death sentence. The creature observed everything. It watched how humans moved, how they scanned terrain, how easily curiosity became obsession. It learned quickly, adapting routes, shifting shelter, changing patterns it had followed for decades. Survival, I realized, was not strength alone. It was flexibility. One evening we stood on a high ridge overlooking a valley lit by artificial lights far below. Helicopters swept the opposite side of the range, chasing nothing. The wind howled around us and snow whipped at our faces. The creature placed a massive hand on my shoulder. The gesture was heavy with meaning. I understood then that I had crossed a line. I was no longer a tourist, no longer even fully human in the way I used to be. I had chosen a side, not of species, but of silence over spectacle, protection over proof. And I knew it could not last forever. The world always wants to know. All we could do was delay it. The searches didn't stop all at once. They faded, slowly, like echoes losing strength. Funding dried up, interest shifted, new mysteries replaced old ones. Humans are like that. We chase wonder until it becomes inconvenient. Then we look away. I knew when it was time to leave. The creature sensed it, too. On my last night in the mountains, we returned to the cave where everything had begun. The fire pit was cold now, the walls dark with old smoke. I sat where I had once been helpless and dying, and felt the weight of what had been given to me without condition. I spoke then, knowing it might not understand the words, but trusting it would understand the meaning. I told it I was going back to my world, that I would keep lying if I had to, that I would never tell anyone the truth that mattered. I promised silence not as secrecy, but as respect. The creature listened without moving. When I finished, it reached down and pressed something into my hand. A shard of stone, smooth and dark, shaped by water and time. A marker, a memory. Then it stepped back into the shadows of the cave, becoming part of the mountain again. I left before sunrise. Years have passed since then. My leg still aches when the weather changes. Sometimes, when life becomes too loud, I find myself staring at distant peaks, listening for sounds I know I'll never hear again. New stories still surface now and then. Blurry photos, footprints, laughter from people who want myths more than truth. I say nothing. Some nights, I dream of snow and firelight, of dark eyes watching with patience, older than fear. I wake with a strange sense of peace, knowing that somewhere beyond roads and signals, a life continues untouched by the need to be believed. I was saved once, when I didn't deserve it, and in returning the favor I learned something the mountains had tried to teach me from the beginning. Not every miracle needs a witness, and not every debt is meant to be repaid in full. Some are meant to be carried quietly for the rest of your life.